Welcome to Fun Facts Daily, your source for just the good stuff. Monday through Friday, we're bringing fun facts and news you can use, all carefully curated to uplift and inform. So give yourself a break, relax, and learn something awesome in just a few minutes every day. Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Wood. Today, we're going to be learning about one of the greatest rock bands of all time. I'm talking about the Beatles, the Fab Four. But before we get into the facts, let's warm up our brains with a little challenge to see if you can tell fact from fiction. Consider this. The Beatles are widely considered the most influential band in history. They wrote hit after hit for years, changing the landscape of the music world forever. But would you believe that despite writing hundreds of beloved songs, none of the four members, John, Paul, George, or Ringo, could actually read or write sheet music? What do you think? Were some of the greatest musical geniuses of the 20th century basically musically illiterate, at least in the formal sense? We'll find out at the end of the episode. Now for your word of the day. Our word for today is Merseybeat. That's Merseybeat. Merseybeat is a noun referring to the genre of pop and rock music that emerged from Liverpool, England in the early 1960s. It was characterized by a sort of jangly guitar sound, very catchy melodies, often with 2 or 3 part harmonies, but perhaps most of all, a driving 4/4 beat that fused American rock and roll with British skiffle, which kind of came out of folk music. The name Merseybeat was actually a reference to the Mersey River, which runs through Liverpool. In 1961, a man named Bill Harry started a music publication called Merseybeat to cover the hundreds of bands playing in Liverpool's city cellars and clubs. The name stuck, becoming the official label for the Liverpool sound. Time for your daily high five, our top 5 fun facts about the Beatles. Number 1. In 1964, the Beatles took all the top slots in Billboard's Hot 100 chart simultaneously. And this set a record that was unbroken for almost 60 years. On April 4th, 1964, the Beatles made music history by occupying the entire top 5 spots on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. The songs Can't Buy Me Love, Twist and Shout, She Loves You, I Wanna Hold Your Hand, and Please Please Me gave them a monopoly on the top of the American charts. This was the peak of the so-called British invasion, a moment when their popularity was so overwhelming that no other artist could compete for airtime or sales. For over 5 decades, that record seemed untouchable. It wasn't until the modern streaming era that anyone managed to catch up. Finally, in September 2021, Drake broke the record by claiming 9 of the top 10 spots. And then, in October 2022, Taylor Swift made history by occupying the entire top 10. But the Beatles record is still mind-blowing because they did it in the era of physical sales. Today, when a massive star drops an album, millions of streams can flood the charts with every single track from the record instantly. But for the Beatles to lock out the top 5 spots in 1964, fans had to physically go to stores and buy hundreds of thousands of individual vinyl singles. So, while Drake and Taylor Swift have finally taken the crown, the Beatles' dominance of the physical marketplace remains a feat that will likely never be repeated. Number 2. One of their biggest hits, Yesterday, actually came to Paul McCartney in a dream. The melody for the iconic ballad Yesterday appeared fully formed in Paul McCartney's head while he was sleeping at his girlfriend's house. When he woke up, he immediately rushed to a piano to play the tune, but he was worried he might have accidentally plagiarized it from an old jazz standard or a song he'd heard in childhood. To make sure it was original, he played it for friends and producers for weeks, asking if they recognized the tune, before finally realizing that he had indeed created it while dreaming. Unfortunately, Dream Paul gave him the melody, but not the lyrics. McCartney used temporary placeholder words to help him remember the phrasing and rhythm while he worked out the rest of the song. He originally called the song Scrambled Eggs, and the opening line was, "Scrambled eggs, oh my baby, how I love your legs." Kind of hits different, but after a while, he found the more somber, reflective lyrics that we know today, and I'd say that was probably a good revision from the breakfast-themed lines. Number 3. The Beatles were so popular, they had to create new ways to play for bigger audiences than anyone thought possible. In August 1965, the Beatles played a concert at Shea Stadium in New York City to a record-breaking crowd of over 55,000 fans. Before the event, rock and pop bands generally played in theaters, ballrooms, or auditoriums, so placing a band in a massive outdoor sports arena was a completely revolutionary and kind of risky concept. The event proved that rock music was a major cultural force capable of filling the largest venues available, and that paved the way for the massive stadium tours we see from major artists today. But the technology at the time was not quite ready for crowds of that size. The screaming of the fans was so incredibly loud that it basically completely drowned out the band's amplifiers, which were designed for much smaller indoor venues. The Beatles said they couldn't even hear themselves play and had to look at each other's rhythmic movements to stay in time. So the concert had become more of kind of a visual event than a musical one because the sound system was just overwhelmed by the roar of the crowd. And that's not the only way they pushed boundaries. In June 1967, they performed on Our World, the first live global satellite television broadcast in history. This broadcast connected 24 countries simultaneously, and the Beatles were there representing the United Kingdom. With over 400 million viewers tuning in from different countries, they knew they needed a message that was universal. John Lennon wrote All You Need Is Love specifically for this moment, using simple words to ensure the message of peace and unity was understood instantly across the globe. Number 4. Strawberry Field and Penny Lane are actual locations you can visit in Liverpool. Two of the band's most psychedelic and nostalgic songs, Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, were written about real childhood haunts of John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Penny Lane is a major bus terminus and street in Liverpool where the two would often meet to catch a bus into the city center. The song's lyrics describe the sights and characters Paul saw there, from the barber showing photographs to the banker waiting for a trim, grounding the song in vivid, working-class reality. Now, Strawberry Field was a Salvation Army children's home located just around the corner from John Lennon's childhood home. As a boy, Lennon would jump the wall to play in the wooded grounds of the orphanage and attend their annual garden parties, which he viewed as a magical escape from his strict upbringing. Today, both locations are major tourist attractions, allowing fans to step directly into the physical spaces that inspired the surreal and beautiful imagery of the band's songwriting. And our fifth and final fun fact for today: the Beatles actually played a major role in ending racial segregation at concerts in the United States. During their 1964 tour of America, the Beatles discovered that the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida, was planning to segregate the audience by race. This was a common practice in the South at the time. The Beatles immediately issued a statement saying, quote, "We never play to segregated audiences, and we aren't going to start now," end quote, threatening to cancel the lucrative show unless the policy was changed. Because the band was so incredibly popular, the venue promoters had no choice but to cave to their demands and allow a fully integrated audience for the first time. The Beatles subsequently added a clause to all their future contracts to ensure that they would not perform unless the crowd was integrated, using their massive fame to force a positive social change at the height of the civil rights movement. Now for some news you can use. If you want to get good at something, I mean really good, you have to put in the hours, and the Beatles are the perfect example for this. Before they were famous, they played residencies in Hamburg, Germany, where they were required to perform for up to 8 hours a night, 7 days a week. This forced them to learn hundreds of songs, cover every genre, and learn how to engage an audience even when they were exhausted. The tip here is to embrace volume in your own practice. Whether you're learning to code, paint, or speak a new language, don't look for shortcuts. Look for opportunities to do the work repeatedly in a lower stakes environment. By the time the Beatles reached America, they sounded tighter and more professional than any other band because they had already logged thousands of hours of performance time. So find your Hamburg, a place where you can practice relentlessly until your skills become second nature. Now for the moment you've been waiting for. At the beginning of the episode, I asked if it's true that the Beatles couldn't actually read or write music. Well, that's a fact. Despite writing some of the most complex and enduring melodies in history, John, Paul, George, and Ringo couldn't actually read or write traditional musical notation. They learned and composed entirely by ear. When they wanted to add orchestral parts like violins in Eleanor Rigby, they would hum or play the melody on a piano to a classically trained producer like George Martin, who would then write it down on sheet music for the session musicians. Now, I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about the Beatles with me today. Be sure to tune in every weekday for even more fun facts. Fun Facts Daily is an Airwave Media podcast. It was written, recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Kyle Wood. Thanks for sharing a part of your day with me. Be sure to follow Fun Facts Daily on your favorite podcast app so you can keep the good stuff coming your way every day. And if you like the show, please do me a favor and leave a kind rating, review, or just tell your friends about it.